It didn't start with lies. That's the cruelest part. It started with honesty. Or at least what I thought was honesty. She told me from the beginning that she'd been hurt before, that she had trouble trusting people. I remember thinking how rare it was for someone to be that vulnerable so soon. I thought it meant she was brave. I didn't realize it meant she was building her defense. Her name was Lena. She had the kind of beauty that made you feel like you were the only one who saw it. Subtle, quiet, dangerous. She smiled like she was confessing something, and every time she looked at me, it felt like she was letting me into a world that no one else was allowed to see. I didn't fall for her fast. I fell deep. At first, everything about her seemed real. She'd text me long paragraphs about her past, her fears, her hopes. She'd stay up all night talking about how people always left her once they got bored. So I promised her I wouldn't. I said I'd stay, no matter what. That was my first mistake. Because when you promise a broken person that you'll never leave, they stop healing. They start testing. The first time it happened, it was small. I came home late from work, just an hour. She didn't say anything at first, but the next morning, her silence was heavier than words. She moved around the kitchen like a ghost, avoiding eye contact. When I asked what was wrong, she whispered, "Nothing. I just thought you'd care enough to come home." I tried to explain, to apologize, but she didn't want to listen. She wanted me to hurt, because in her mind, pain was proof. She needed to see how much I was willing to suffer to prove that I loved her. And I did. I apologized, over and over, for things that didn't need apologies. I started rushing home from work, turning down plans, shrinking my life to fit inside the walls of her moods. But Lena didn't want peace. She wanted control. She had this way of making every good thing feel like a debt I owed her. If I surprised her with flowers, she'd say, "You only did that because you feel guilty." If I cooked her dinner, she'd smile and whisper, "Are you trying to make up for something?" There was no winning, only surviving the next storm. What I didn't know then was that Lena was addicted to being the victim. She needed to be wronged, even if she had to invent the crime herself. And I became the perfect suspect, patient, loyal, always trying to fix what I didn't break. I started to notice how her stories about her past didn't quite add up. The timelines shifted, the names changed, details blurred. But every time I asked questions, she'd look at me with tears in her eyes and say, "You don't believe me?" And just like that, I'd become the enemy again. She'd disappear for hours, turn off her phone, then come back as if nothing happened. When I asked where she'd been, she'd say, "You don't own me." When I didn't ask, she'd snap, "You don't even care." Every reaction was wrong, and that's how she liked it. Because the goal wasn't communication. It was confusion. She wanted me dizzy, guessing, apologizing, always chasing a version of her that existed only when she needed me to feel safe again. And when I finally realized what was happening, it was already too late. Because by then, I wasn't staying because I loved her anymore. I was staying because I was afraid of what she'd become if I didn't. It's strange how easily love can turn into fear without you noticing. One moment you're trying to comfort the person you love, and the next, you're apologizing for the way they make you feel. That's what it became with Lena, a constant loop of guilt, confusion, and surrender disguised as care. She had this way of weaponizing her pain. Every time she felt me pulling away, even slightly, she'd open old wounds and make me feel like I caused them. "You remind me of my father," she once said through tears. "He used to walk away when I needed him most." I froze, because how do you respond to that? I wasn't her father, but in that moment, I wasn't a person either. I was just another chance for her to relive her trauma and rewrite it. So I stayed. She learned quickly that I couldn't stand to see her cry. It became her favorite trick. Every argument, every suspicion, every tiny disagreement ended the same way, with tears. She'd crumble in front of me, her voice trembling, whispering, "You don't understand how much you're hurting me." And every time I'd cave, I'd wrap my arms around her, apologize, promise to do better. But I didn't realize that every apology was surrender. Another piece of myself traded away for peace that never lasted. Soon, she started using her pain like currency. When she wanted something, attention, control, forgiveness. She'd spend it freely. "I can't sleep when you're angry," she'd say after a fight, her eyes red and fragile. "Do you want me to have another panic attack?" And suddenly, my frustration would vanish. I'd swallow my words, bury my anger, and comfort her instead. Her favorite line was, "I'm broken, and you said you'd never leave me." And she was right. I had said that. I meant it when I said it. But I didn't know she'd use it as a chain. She began to twist my empathy into obedience. If I wanted to visit a friend, she'd go quiet. When I asked what was wrong, she'd say, "Nothing. I just thought you liked spending time with me." If I worked late, she'd text, "It's fine. I know your job is more important than me." If I laughed at a co-worker's joke, she'd murmur, "You never laugh like that with me anymore." It was always small, almost invisible, death by 1,000 doubts. I started walking on emotional eggshells, terrified of saying or doing the wrong thing. My life became a constant calculation of her moods, what might set her off, what might calm her down. I told myself it was love, that this was what it meant to be there for someone who's been hurt. But the truth was, she wasn't healing, she was feeding, and I was starving. Then came the stories, the ones she told to keep me hooked. She'd talk about her exes, but not like most people do. Her stories were designed to make me feel like the hero and the villain. "They all left because they couldn't handle me," she'd say softly. "You're different. You actually care." But then, a few weeks later, she'd say, "Sometimes I feel like you're just like them." Every compliment came with a curse. Every reassurance was temporary. She'd build me up just to knock me down, over and over, until I started craving the moment of calm like an addict waiting for a fix. Once, after a long fight about nothing, something as small as me not answering my phone fast enough, she locked herself in the bathroom. I could hear her crying, saying she didn't want to live anymore. I panicked. I begged her open the door, terrified of what she might do. When she finally did, she collapsed into my arms, shaking. "You did this," she whispered. "You made me feel like I wasn't enough." That night, I sat by her bed until morning, watching her sleep, feeling sick with guilt. But somewhere deep inside, I knew it wasn't guilt I should have felt. It was fear. From that point on, she stopped needing to raise her voice. A sigh, a look, a small pause was enough to control me. I could sense her disappointment before she even said it. I became hyper-aware of everything. How long I talked to people, where I went, even how I breathed when she was upset. And the scariest part? I started lying to myself just to survive it, telling myself she just needed time, that it was my fault she didn't trust me, that real love meant patience. But love isn't supposed to feel like guilt. It's not supposed to feel like begging for forgiveness when you didn't do anything wrong. The worst night came 3 months in. We were out at dinner with some friends. My first social outing in weeks. She was quiet the whole night, her smile practiced, her laughter sharp. When one of my friends made a joke and I laughed, I felt her hand tighten under the table. She didn't say a word then, but I could feel the storm brewing behind her eyes. When we got home, she didn't even wait until the door closed. "You embarrass me," she hissed. "You flirted with her." "What? I didn't." "Don't lie to me," she shouted. "You think I didn't see the way you looked at her?" I stood there, stunned, trying to reason with her. But reason didn't exist in her world. The argument spiraled until she was crying again, sobbing so loudly the neighbors might have heard. And there I was, apologizing again, holding her, whispering, "I didn't mean to make you feel that way." But deep down, something cracked in me that night, because I realized she didn't want the truth. She wanted my submission. And for the first time, I wondered if she'd ever actually been hurt, or if every story, every tear, every trembling confession had just been another tool in her collection. That was the night I stopped seeing her as a victim, and started realizing I might be one. It's terrifying how control can disguise itself as love. How someone can make you believe that isolation is protection, that fear is devotion, that silence is peace. By the time I realized what was happening, Lena had woven herself into every corner of my life. She didn't just live with me. She lived through me. After that night, the dinner, the accusations, the tears, everything changed. She apologized, of course. She always did. She'd hold my face in her hands, her eyes wet, whispering, "I'm sorry. I just get scared sometimes. You're all I have." And I'd melt, because when you love someone like her, every apology feels like hope, a promise that maybe next time will be different. But it never was. Soon, she started watching me more closely. Not just what I said, but how I said it. If I texted too fast, she'd ask who I was trying to impress. If I texted too slow, she'd ask who was distracting me. If I smiled at my phone, she'd demand to see the message. Every small action became evidence in her invisible trial against me. And when I pushed back, she didn't yell. She never needed to. She'd just whisper, "Why are you hiding things from me?" And then she'd cry, and I'd break again. That's how she worked. She didn't want to control my body. She wanted to control my guilt. She knew if she made me feel responsible for her happiness, I'd never stop trying to fix her. After a while, she didn't even have to say anything. If I mentioned a friend's name, she'd sigh. If I said I wanted to go out, she'd go quiet. She'd just sit there, her silence sharp enough to cut through the air, until I gave in. I stopped seeing my friends. I stopped calling my family. I stopped doing anything that might upset her, not because she told me to, but because I couldn't stand that look in her eyes. That's the trick of manipulation. It doesn't demand obedience. It teaches you to police yourself. She started managing my life without me even realizing it. "I already emailed your boss," she'd say. "I told him you're taking the weekend off. You need rest." I'd thank her, thinking she was being thoughtful. But later, I'd find out she'd use that time to drag me into one of her emotional storms. Fights that lasted hours, cycles that started with tears and ended with guilt. She kept a mental ledger of everything I'd ever said or done, every mistake, every argument, every forgotten promise. And when she needed to win, she'd open it like scripture. "You remember what you said on July 14th? You said you'd never make me feel unwanted again. You lied." She could quote entire conversations word for word, or at least a version of them, until I started doubting my own memory. And that's when I realized she wasn't just controlling me emotionally. She was rewriting reality. There was one night that still haunts me. We'd been arguing. I can't even remember about what. I went to the bedroom to get some air, and when I came back, she was standing in the kitchen holding her phone, her expression blank. "I recorded what you said," she told me quietly, "in case you ever try to twist it later." I froze. "What are you talking about?" "You always make me feel like I imagine things," she said. "Now I'll have proof." That was the moment I understood I wasn't in a relationship anymore. I was in a trial, one where the verdict was always guilty, no matter what I said. After that, I started keeping my own records too. Not out of revenge, but survival. I'd record small conversations, write down dates, even take photos of things she might later deny existed. It made me feel sick, like I was turning into her. But I didn't see another way to stay sane. Every few days, she'd shift from paranoia to tenderness, from cruelty to comfort. She'd bake cookies, play soft music, curl up beside me and say, "I just want us to be happy again." And I'd almost believe her until the next storm hit. Then she started attacking my memory directly. "I told you about this," she'd say. "No, you didn't." "Yes, I did." "You're forgetting again." Over and over, until I actually began to wonder if something was wrong with me. She'd claim I said things I hadn't, that I'd promised things I didn't remember. She'd tell me we had conversations that never happened, and when I insisted we hadn't, she'd go quiet, then whisper, "It's scary how much you forget sometimes." Eventually, I started relying on her to tell me what had happened, and that's when I realized she had me completely. The final blow came one night, when I found her messaging someone online. It wasn't overtly romantic, but it wasn't innocent either. Flirty jokes, late-night conversations, the kind of things that cross lines quietly. When I confronted her, she didn't deny it. She just smiled. "I can't believe you're checking my phone," she said calmly. "I guess you don't trust me after all." Somehow, I ended up apologizing again for invading her privacy. After that, I felt myself fading. I'd wake up every morning already exhausted, waiting for the next emotional ambush. I stopped recognizing my own voice when I spoke. I started having dreams where I was trapped in a house with no doors, every window covered by mirrors reflecting her face. I think the scariest part wasn't losing her, it was losing me. And still I stayed, because leaving someone like her doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like betrayal, not of her, but the version of yourself that thought you could save her. It's a slow kind of drowning, the kind where you stop struggling because the water starts to feel warm. But deep down, beneath all the exhaustion, there was a small flicker of something else, something dangerous, something she couldn't control. Doubt. It started whispering at the back of my mind. What if it's not you? What if she's the problem? And once that thought appears, even once, it's like a crack in a glass. It doesn't stop spreading. Doubt. It starts small, just a flicker, a question that slides quietly into your thoughts and stays there, whispering. I used to think love was about trust, but when you live with someone like Lena, love becomes about survival, and survival doesn't leave room for trust. After months of walking on eggshells, my mind began doing something strange. It started cataloging her inconsistencies, the way her tone shifted when she lied, the phrases she reused whenever she was manipulating me, the gaps in her stories that no longer made sense. For so long I trained myself not to see them, because seeing them meant admitting the truth, that the woman I loved wasn't broken. She was dangerous. It began with something small, her phone. She'd always kept it close, face down, like it was an extension of her body. But one night, she fell asleep early, and I saw it light up on the nightstand. A message preview from a name I didn't recognize. You free tomorrow? My chest tightened, but I didn't touch it. Not yet. I just watched the screen dim, and I sat there, trying to convince myself it didn't matter. But the next morning, she woke up and smiled at me like nothing had happened. And that's when I realized something. She looked too calm, like she already knew I'd seen it, like she wanted me to. That's how she worked. Every suspicion was a trap. She'd create just enough tension to make me confront her, then twist the confrontation into proof of my paranoia. I didn't take the bait. Not this time. Instead, I started listening, watching, paying attention. She'd tell stories that didn't add up. Friends who suddenly changed names, places she claimed to go that didn't exist, co-workers I could never verify. She spoke in contradictions, but each one was wrapped in emotions so thick that questioning her felt cruel. You don't believe me? She'd whisper, her eyes filling with tears. After everything I've told you? So I stopped asking out loud. I started asking silently. When she said she had a work meeting, I checked her location. It wasn't work. When she said she was with her friend Julia's social media showed her in another city. When she said her phone had died, I could see the light of it glowing in her hand from across the room. Each light chipped away at the illusion, one small truth at a time. But the more aware I became, the more careful she grew. It was as if she could sense the shift inside me. She'd start conversations with, "You've been quiet lately. What are you thinking?" Her voice soft, sweet, laced with warning. "Nothing." I'd say, "You're lying," she'd reply. "I can feel it." I started realizing she didn't want love anymore. She wanted omnipotence. She needed to know everything, control everything, anticipate every thought before it became rebellion. And when she couldn't, she punished me with silence. It wasn't yelling or fighting anymore. It was indifference, a kind of cold that made you beg for her warmth again. And when I finally broke and reached for her, she'd smile, kiss my cheek, and whisper, "I knew you couldn't stay mad at me." That smile haunted me. It wasn't affection. It was victory. So I began documenting everything, the gaslighting, the contradictions, the manipulation, not to use it against her, but to remind myself what was real, because she'd made me doubt even my own memory, and I needed proof that my mind wasn't betraying me. One evening, I tested her. I told her I was going to stay late at work for a project that didn't exist. In truth, I parked my car 2 blocks away and waited. At 8:42 p.m., she walked out of the apartment dressed like she was going somewhere she didn't want to know about. Her phone was in her hand, her expression calm, her steps light. I watched her meet someone at the corner, a man. He hugged her, and she leaned into it. It wasn't affection. It was possession. The same kind of false tenderness she used on me. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just went home before her, sat in the dark, and waited. When she walked in hours later, she smiled like always and said, "Long day at work?" "Yeah," I said quietly. She kissed me, her lips soft, familiar, hollow. I looked at her, at this woman I'd given everything to, and for the first time, I didn't feel love. I felt clarity. And clarity is the first step toward freedom. That night, while she slept, I replayed everything. The lies, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the way she'd isolated me and made me doubt my own reality. I realized she'd never loved me. She'd loved control. I wasn't her partner. I was her mirror, the reflection that proved she had power. But the cracks had finally spread too far. She didn't know it yet, but I was already gone. The moment clarity settles in, you stop being predictable. And when someone like Lena senses unpredictability, they don't calm down, they sharpen. They become even more dangerous, because control isn't a habit for them. It's survival. After the night I saw her with the man at the corner, everything changed inside me. Outwardly, I stayed the same. The quiet, apologetic boyfriend, the one who checked his phone too much and said sorry too often. But in my head, the script had flipped. I wasn't waiting for her mood anymore. I was watching, planning, waiting for my moment, and she felt it. It started small. She'd ask more questions, double-check my stories, test me with little traps. "What did you say you were doing tomorrow?" she'd ask casually. Or, "Who was it you texted last night?" When I answered calmly, she'd watch my face for cracks. When I didn't react, she'd push harder. Then she started tightening the leash. She'd show up at my work unannounced, bringing coffee, smiling at my co-workers, planting seeds. "He's been so stressed lately," she'd say sweetly to them. "I'm worried about him." Little by little, she began framing me as unstable, concerned girlfriend protecting her fragile man. It was a genius move. By the time I left, she wanted the world to believe she'd saved me, not broken me. At home, the manipulation escalated. Her silences got longer, her accusations sharper. But now I didn't rise to them. I started taking notes, saving every message, forwarding copies to a private email she didn't know existed. Every time she lied, I logged it. Every time she twisted my words, I wrote down the real ones. I wasn't sure yet if I'd use any of it. I just needed reality to anchor me. She tried a new tactic then, affection, the kind of affection that had hooked me in the first place. She'd cook my favorite meals, run her fingers through my hair, whisper at night, "I know you're tired. I know you're scared, but I'll never leave you." Once, she even cried while holding me. "I don't know what's happening to us," she whispered. "I feel like you're pulling away and I'm terrified." It almost worked. For a moment, I felt the old ache, the urge to protect her, to reassure her, to stay. But then I remembered the man at the corner. I remembered the messages she'd fabricated. I remembered the way she'd built her story brick by brick, making me the villain before I even knew I'd been accused. That night, I decided on my exit. Not just leaving physically, but leaving clean. No screaming match, no explosion she could twist into evidence. Just a quiet disappearance with my truth intact. I started moving money into a separate account. I got a new phone under a different name. I found a small apartment across town through a friend she didn't know. I packed small things, documents, clothes, piece by piece, hiding them at my sister's house. Each step felt like learning how to breathe again. But Lena's intuition was razor sharp. She began planting even bigger lies, calling people I knew to check on me, hinting at mental health issues, telling them I'd been acting strange. She wanted to isolate me even more before the break. If she could paint me as unstable, then my leaving would look like proof of her story. I realized then, she didn't just want me gone. She wanted to erase me. So I became a ghost of my own life, smiling when she looked, moving in silence when she didn't. Every evening, while she scrolled on her phone, I was writing a long document of everything she'd done, everything I'd seen, every word she'd said when she thought no one was listening. It wasn't revenge. It was self-defense. The last straw came one night when she sat on the edge of the bed and said, "Sometimes I think you're just like them." "Who?" I asked quietly. "All the men who left me," she said, her eyes shining with a mixture of anger and challenge. "But you won't leave. You're too good for that." It wasn't a plea. It was a dare. And in that moment, I knew. She believed she owned me. She believed no matter what she did, I'd stay, because she trained me to. She was wrong. The next morning, before she woke up, I packed the last of my things. This time, it wasn't a trial run. It wasn't a plan. It was escape. But as I zipped the bag, my phone buzzed with a new message. A friend from work. "She's been telling people you're dangerous," it said. "She said she's afraid of you." I sat there, bag in hand, reading the words over and over. She wasn't just planning to make me the villain. She was already doing it. That's when I realized leaving wouldn't be enough. I'd have to take my story with me, or lose it forever. When you live with someone like her, you learn that leaving isn't about courage. It's about timing. If you go too soon, she'll pull you back. If you wait too long, she'll destroy you before you even take your first step. I spent weeks memorizing her patterns. When she slept deepest, when she scrolled her phone the longest, when she let her guard down. Lena was predictable in her chaos. She always believed she had more power than she actually did. That arrogance became the only thing I could use against her. I had everything ready. My bag was already hidden in the trunk of my car, half packed with essentials: ID, clothes, cash, my backup phone, and a folder that held everything I collected. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start over. I'd sent copies of all my evidence, the recordings, screenshots, messages to a trusted friend, just in case. If something happened to me, the truth wouldn't die with her story. I remember that day clearly. The air felt heavy, like the sky was holding its breath. Lena was quiet that morning, too quiet. She'd been watching me differently for the past few days. Not suspiciously, not yet, but attentively, like a predator who senses the animal beneath her is about to bolt. "Why are you up so early?" she asked when I came out of the shower. Her tone was casual, but her eyes weren't. "Couldn't sleep," I said. She smiled, setting down her coffee. "You've been distant lately." "I feel it." I wanted to say, "because I'm suffocating." I wanted to say, "because you took everything that made me human and turned it into evidence against me." But instead, I smiled and said, "Just tired." She walked over, brushed her fingers through my hair, and whispered, "You'd tell me if you were hiding something, right?" I nodded, and she kissed me softly, her lips warm and slow, a kiss that felt like surveillance. That was Lena's genius. She could make love feel like interrogation. All day, I played the part. I texted her sweet things, told her I'd be late getting home from work. She replied with a heart emoji, short but not suspicious. I stayed at the office later than usual, pacing, checking the time, reading and rereading the list of steps I'd written down in my head. It was almost mechanical. Go home, wait until she falls asleep, leave the keys, drive away, never look back. Simple. But when someone has been inside your head long enough, even simple things become terrifying. I drove home that night with my heart pounding like a drum inside a cage. She was sitting on the couch when I walked in, a glass of wine in her hand, the TV on low. She smiled, too brightly. "Hey," she said, "I ordered dinner. I thought we could have a quiet night together. No phones. Just us." Every alarm in my body went off. I tried to play along. We ate, we talked, or rather, she talked. About work, about her friend Julia who suddenly stopped responding, about how people were so fake these days. She spoke like someone rehearsing normalcy. I smiled, nodded, and kept my breathing steady. But she kept watching me. Every few minutes, her eyes would flick toward my face, searching. "You're not listening," she said finally. "I am. I lied." "No, you're not." Her voice was soft, too soft. "You're somewhere else." I froze. For a second, I thought she knew. But then she smiled, slow, patient, cruel. "It's okay," she said, leaning forward. "You can tell me what's wrong." I didn't. I just said, "Nothing's wrong." "Liar," she whispered, her smile widening. "You've been lying a lot lately." She stood up, walked around the table, and placed her hand on my chest, her nails pressed just enough to hurt. "You think I don't see it?" she asked. "The way you look at me now, like you're somewhere else already." I wanted to run, but I forced myself to stay still. "Lena," I said, "you're imagining things." Her hand slid up to my neck. "No," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm remembering things." She laughed quietly. "You forget that I know you better than you know yourself. I can tell when you're lying." And then she said something that made my blood run cold. "I know you're leaving me." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The air between us felt sharp. "What?" I whispered. She tilted her head, studying me. "You've been hiding things. Taking your things to the car. Saving screenshots. Do you think I don't notice?" My mouth went dry. She stepped back, crossing her arms. "I don't blame you, though. You want to leave? Fine, but you should know something." Her tone changed, colder, flatter. "If you walk out that door, everyone will believe I had to protect myself. They already do. You should read the messages I sent them." "What did you do?" I asked quietly. She smiled. "I told them you've been violent, that I'm scared of you. I even have pictures." "Pictures?" "Scratches," she said. "Bruises. You don't have to hit someone for them to believe you did. They just have to look at the story long enough." I felt sick. "You're lying." She shrugged. "Maybe, but it doesn't matter. You think truth wins? Truth doesn't matter when people want a victim to root for." And that was the moment I understood exactly how far she'd go. I walked past her into the bedroom, my body on autopilot. My mind was spinning. Every exit I'd planned was collapsing in front of me. If I left now, I'd look guilty. If I stayed, I'd drown. She followed me to the doorway. "Don't look at me like that," she said softly. "You made me like this." I turned around. "No, Lena," I said, my voice shaking. "You did that to yourself." Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, something between rage and fear. Then she smiled again. "Maybe, but it doesn't matter, because when you leave, I'll cry. And when I cry, they'll believe me." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor beside the bed, staring at the faint glow of her phone on the nightstand. Every message she'd ever sent, every fake story, every trap. It all played in my head. I realized then that I couldn't leave quietly. She wouldn't let me. I had to vanish loudly. Before dawn, I packed what little was left. The bag from the car, my laptop, the drive with the recordings. I left my phone on the table, screen unlocked, messages open, so she could see I hadn't deleted anything. Let her believe she'd won. Then I walked out into the cold. The sky was pale gray, the city still asleep. I drove until the sun came up, until my phone stopped buzzing with her name. I didn't look back once. Later that day, I checked my email from a borrowed laptop. There it was, her first move. She'd already posted online. Photos, long captions, words that made me sound like a monster. People were commenting, supporting her, sending messages like, "You're so brave. No one deserves that." She'd done it. She'd burned my name before I could even speak. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I'd already sent my truth to my family, to my closest friends, to the few people who knew me well enough to recognize her lies for what they were. And for the first time in years, I didn't care what anyone else believed, because the truth wasn't about saving my reputation anymore. It was about saving myself. She wanted me to vanish as her villain. I chose to disappear as my own man. And when I turned off that borrowed phone, the silence that followed didn't sound like fear anymore. It sounded like freedom. Freedom isn't fireworks. It isn't a dramatic exit or a single heroic moment. It's quiet. It's sitting in a room that no one else has the key to and realizing, for the first time in years, that you can breathe without permission. That's where I found myself 2 weeks after I left Lena, in a tiny apartment on the edge of the city, sitting on the floor, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and the sound of nothing. She'd done exactly what she promised. My phone, the one I'd left behind, was flooded with messages from mutual friends, coworkers, even strangers. Screenshots of her posts, her bruises, her long captions about years of silent abuse. She'd painted me perfectly. The controlling boyfriend, the gaslighter, the quiet manipulator who'd finally been exposed. And people believed her. Of course they did. That's the genius of someone like Lena. By the time you run, she's already built the cage of your reputation. So when you escape, you're running out of your own prison into hers. At first I wanted to fight back, to post my evidence, to drop every recording, every message, every contradiction like a bomb. But then I stopped, because that was still playing her game. I realized that no amount of proof changes people who've already chosen their hero and their villain. They don't want the truth, they want the story. And she'd already given them one. So instead of screaming into the void, I started writing. Not posts, not rebuttals, just a record, pages and pages of everything. How she isolated me, how she made me doubt my own memory, how she planted lies like seeds and watered them with tears. It wasn't for the internet. It wasn't even for my friends. It was for me, to remember who I was before her and who I was now. Slowly, I started reaching out to the people who mattered, the ones she hadn't poisoned yet. My sister, my oldest friend, my mentor from work. I didn't dump evidence on them. I just talked, explained, and they listened. Some already suspected. Some admitted they'd seen the warning signs. One by one, the net she'd cast around me began to fray. Meanwhile, her posts grew darker, angrier. She stopped looking like a victim and started sounding like what she really was, a person who couldn't stand losing control. People began noticing the inconsistencies. A few reached out quietly, asking if I was okay. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. And then one morning, a message arrived in my inbox from an unknown address. No greeting, no subject line. Just 2 words. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time. No name, no signature, but I knew it was her. It didn't feel like an apology. It felt like bait, like she wanted to know if the hook was still in me. I didn't reply. That's when I understood something she could never take from me. Silence. Not the silence she used as punishment, but the silence I could choose. The kind that isn't empty, but full of peace. Now, when I walk outside, I don't check over my shoulder. When my phone buzzes, it isn't a summons. It's just a notification. I go to work. I see my friends. I sleep without waiting for footsteps outside the bedroom door. These things sound small, but they're not. They're freedom. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the man I was when I met her, eager, open, convinced that love meant giving someone every piece of yourself. I'm not that man anymore. I'm not sure I ever will be again. But I'm alive, and for the first time in years, that feels like enough. If you're reading this and you're with someone like her, someone who twists your words, who makes you feel like you're always one wrong step from disaster, who convinces you that their chaos is your fault, hear me. It's not you, it's them. And the longer you wait, the deeper the hooks go. Leaving won't make you the villain. Staying will make you disappear. I know because I almost did. And the last thing Lena ever taught me was this. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting be believed. It's walking away, knowing they'll call you the monster, and choosing to live anyway. So here I am, alive, silent, free, and I don't need her permission to tell this story anymore.